Boker Tov, good morning, everybody, and welcome. Today we're learning Torah study, the Torah portion of the week. We're learning the Parsha of Ki Seitzei. Ki Seitzei is a beautiful Parsha. Every Parsha is a beautiful Parsha. But let's take a look. It's got a lot of the mitzvahs of the Torah in this week's Torah portion. You have a total of 27 positive mitzvahs and 47 prohibitions. That's 74 mitzvahs out of 613 mitzvahs in one Torah portion. That's pretty intense. It's well over 10% of the mitzvahs of the Torah are included in this week's Torah portion. But one mitzvah that I'd like to draw your attention to is a very interesting mitzvah that applies at all times. Can you think of a mitzvah that you have to do every single moment of every single day? I don't see any other comments coming in. I'm concerned that the chat box might not be working. If anybody give me a sign of life here, would be great. I don't know. I can see that we have the viewers, but I don't see. Oh, there it is, Corey. Thank you very much. Good. Just wanted to make sure that you can see me. Terry, Marty, Garrett. Oh, from Garrett from New York City. Fantastic. So the question I'd like to ask you this morning is, which mitzvah can you think of that applies at every single moment of every single day? Never stops. You know, there's a great story about King David that he was in the shower and he felt that he was a little sad that he was void of the mitzvahs. He was naked of the mitzvahs until he realized that he had his bris. So you remember that the act of having a bris is a mitzvah, which connected him in the covenant to God Almighty. But that's something which is one and done. What is the mitzvah that you have to constantly be doing at every single moment in time? And for that, I'd like to draw your attention to the very, very end of this week's Torah portion. If you have the blue chumash, I'll tell you where it is. We're turning to page 1206. 1207, actually, in the English. Good morning, Winston. 1207, the mitzvah is the mitzvah of remembering Amalek, and we're going to try to understand a new perspective today on who Amalek is and our obsession with remembering this nation at every moment of every day. Let's take a look. Page 1207, middle of the page, you have been taught that God, this is the maftir of this week's Torah portion, that God will obliterate any remembrance of the nation of Amalek. You too must do your part in obliterating anything that could cause anyone to think about Amalek. Therefore, you must remember what the nation of Amalek did to you when you were traveling through the desert after you left Egypt, and remember to take the steps necessary to obliterate any trace of Amalek. Now, this is interesting. This nation is different to all other nations. This enemy is not the same as the other enemies of Israel, because this one we don't just destroy this nation that try to kill us. This is a nation that we have to constantly remember. While they're down, we got to kick them. And the question is why? Why are we so obsessed with Amalek more than with the Nazis, more than with the Crusaders, more than with the Cossacks? What is it about this particular nation, hi Alex, that we're so concerned about? Specifically, remember how on the way Amalek attacked by surprise those amongst you who had sinned and had therefore been expelled from the protective clouds of glory. And how Amalek cut off all these men who were weakened by sin and who were therefore outside the clouds at your rear. When the Jewish people left Egypt, they were surrounded by clouds of glory. The clouds of glory served as ahead of their times. They were air conditioning services for the Jewish people through the desert over 40 years. And providing them protection and other beautiful benefits. But if you sinned, you were expelled. You weren't worthy of being inside the clouds of glory, so you weren't protected. And it was those stragglers that Amalek went after. Amalek did this after you had been faint from thirst at Rephidim, and you were weary from your journey, and they did not fear retribution from God in attacking you. By being the first to attack you, Amalek weakened all other nations' fear of you. Are you going to join me? Oh, fantastic. You can send in the comments room if you want. So Amalek wasn't afraid of God. By being first to attack you, Amalek weakened all the other nations' fear of you. The Medrash gives us an example of what Amalek's audacity was like. An example of a boiling hot bath, a boiling hot mikveh, like a swimming pool, whatever you call it, a spa, and it's boiling hot, and everybody's afraid of going in. You have one nut job that doesn't care and jumps in. So even though he burns himself with third-degree burns, psychologically, that bathtub now becomes approachable to everybody else. That's what happened with Amalek. When the Jewish people came out of Egypt, they were high and mighty. They were on their high horses, having now crippled the world's superpower, brought her to her knees with 10 crushing plagues. The Jewish people were invincible, indefatigable. The word is, Israel uses it a lot for her enemies. The word is, when your enemies are afraid of you, what's that word? When they don't even try to attack you. There's a word for this in English. The word is, maybe somebody could help me. Elaine, you're good at this stuff. Or Garrett. No, it's not intimidated. It's when a nation won't even think of attacking you because they're afraid of you. Israel has her natural, I don't know, whatever. Maybe somebody can help me. This is what the Jewish people had when they came out of Egypt. The nations of the world were afraid to attack us until the nation of Amalek attacked us. And that's when people realized, oh, I guess you can attack them. Even though Amalek got burned real bad and they got beaten up, it doesn't matter. It still weakened the intimidation factor that the Jewish people had over their enemies. Oh, can't think of the word. Therefore, in order to restore your esteem in the world's eyes, when God, your God, grants you respite from all of your enemies surrounding you in the land that God, your God, is giving you to possess as an inheritance that you can bequeath to your descendants, you must obliterate the remembrance of Amalek from beneath the heaven. You must not forget to do this. So you got to obliterate and not forget to do it. Because you are obligated to wipe out anything that would cause people to remember Amalek in any concrete way, you are allowed and even obligated to remember Amalek abstractly in order to do this. Okay, so this is the Torah portion. It's the Maftir. We read it twice this Shabbos, one in the 7th Aliyah and again in the Maftir. What's up with Amalek? What's this obsession that we have with this nation of Amalek? That 3,250 years later, the Torah is reminding us that every single minute of every single day, we have to remember not only to obliterate the remembrance of Amalek from beneath heaven, but you must not forget. There's a double expression here. Timche, wipe out, and leitishkach, don't forget. So don't forget to forget them. Don't forget to erase them. Who is Amalek? Why? What's going on over here? In general, we know that Chassidus is the light of Torah. Chassidus is the soul of Torah, just like a human being is made up of a body and a soul. It's sad when you go to a doctor who recognizes the existence only of the body, but fails to recognize the existence of the soul. Such a doctor is so short-sighted and superficial in his inability to understand the true nature of what he's trying to heal. But when you recognize that there's a liver and a pancreas, an arm and a leg, in addition to a human being who has a soul and who has traumas and who has wounds and who has attachments, and who might be struggling in something which is more than meets the eye, that would make for a holistic approach to healing. And when it comes to your own happiness, you need to make sure that you don't only feed your body physical food, but you also have to nourish your soul as well. I know a lot of people that have a lot of money, many homes and cars and golf course memberships, but they're miserable. Why are they miserable? Because they don't nourish their soul. They don't serve to feed their soul what their soul needs. And those needs are, for example, friendship, love, attachment to other people, to be challenged, to grow. Why am I going in this tangent? It's because I'm trying to bring to your attention that there's more than meets the eye. A human being is not just a body, but a soul too. The same thing goes with Torah. Deterrence, that was the word, Elaine. Thank you. Deterrence. That was the word I was looking for. Israel is a natural deterrence of her enemies. They're afraid of her, and Amalek was the one that busted that pierced the hole in that deterrence that caused the other nations to say, you know what, if you could do it, maybe I could do it too. Thank you. So when it comes to Torah as well, there's not only a body, but there's a soul of Torah. I mean, it happens to everything. There's a book has a body and a soul. There's the paper and the ink of the book, and then there's the wisdom contained within it. That's intangible. It's invisible, but it's essential to what's going on over there. Same thing with Torah. It's not enough to just learn the revealed parts of Torah. You also need to study the hidden parts of Torah. That's the soul of Torah. That's the teachings of Chassidus. To understand not only the what, but also the why. What Chassidus now does for us is takes a piece of Torah that we can relate to. It's the nation of Amalek to try to kill us. And we have our obsession to always remember to erase them. Comes Chassidus, and this is specifically the teachings of our Rebbe, that's going to teach us who Amalek is and make it so incredibly personal. To take this objective nemesis of ours that makes us Jewish people feel like elephants that we just don't forget. A nation that tried to harm us 3,000 years ago, and puts it into such clear focus to help us understand that Amalek is a war that you're fighting today. The way that Rabbi explains it is like this. Amalek is a nation that understood the power of God Almighty. They knew that Hashem is in charge. They knew that Hashem is the one responsible for bringing the Jewish people out of Egypt through those 10 miraculous plagues that changed the course of the natural world. Blood, plagues of frogs, darkness, boils, death of the firstborn, and so on and so forth. They understood that God is the one that split open the Red Sea, that God is the one that gave them the Torah as it was given at Mount Sinai. They understood that God is in control. However, the nation of Amalek had a disconnect between what they understood in their head and how they behaved on a practical level with their arms and their legs. There was a dissonance between their understanding and their action. Have you ever met a person whose actions are not consistent with their understanding? Welcome, yours truly. This is something that we human beings all struggle with. You'll notice that our head is large and it goes through the narrow constraints of the neck. The neck is what actually takes, in a physical sense, in a physical sense, our brain is in our head, and then it expands into our shoulders, right? As expressive of our intellect evolving into emotions which fan the flames of intellect. When you understand something and then you evolve it into an emotion through meditation, what happens is that it becomes much bigger, like the expansion of the broadness of the shoulders. But to go from the head to the shoulders, you got to go through the narrow constraints of the neck, where the idea is actually processed through a filter. And that, the neck, is what Amalek is. Amalek is what creates this disconnect between what I understand and how I behave. So I know that God is the master of the universe. But does that mean that I have to come to shul? Does that mean that I have to give tzedakah? Does that mean I have to lay tefillin every day? Does that translate into a life of Torah and mitzvahs? For most people, it's not necessarily. And that is why we have to remember to erase the memory of Amalek. We're not just talking about some ancient nation that walked the face of this earth, that happened to bump into the Jewish people 3,250 years ago. That they happened to be the ones that pierced the deterrence shield that the Jewish people had. No. This is a far more spiritual reality that's at play over here. The Torah's obsession with reminding us every single day to remember, never to forget, to eradicate Amalek. We have 6 remembrances that you're supposed to remember every single day. And you're supposed to recite them every day after the morning services. In case you have the siddur in front of you, they appear on page 84 in the blue siddur. You're supposed to recite these 6 remembrances. One of them is the remembrance of Amalek. It's a mitzvah that applies at every single moment of every single day to remember to destroy Amalek. Amalek is the dissonance between the brain and the action, between what I understand and how I behave. How many Jews do we meet who say, Rabbi, I'm a good Jew in my heart? It's lovely. It's a good start. But no, how does that express in action? There's a lovely metaphor of a farmer who goes with his wife to visit the doctor. He's a simple man, and he goes with his wife to visit the doctor. She's not feeling well. She has chest pains. So they go together to the doctor, and the doctor asks her to stretch out her wrist, and the doctor takes her pulse as he feels her pulse on the wrist. And the simple farmer says, Doctor, why are you feeling her wrist? If it's her chest that's in pain, her heart is in pain. Says the wise doctor with kind eyes to the farmer. He says, yes, I know it's her heart that's hurting. But from the hand, we can tell what's going on in the heart. From the actions, we can perceive what's going on in the heart. It's not enough for the heart to remain in an insulated bubble. The heart needs to express itself, to manifest in the action. The convictions of the heart, the perceptions of the brain need to manifest in your actions, in your thought, speech, and action, which is your clothing, your garment, to use a language of Tanya. And if you're not doing that, then you have been hijacked by the nation of Amalek. So you might know in your head that God is great. You might know that God is in control of every single detail of the universe at every single moment in time. But if that doesn't manifest in becoming a better person and becoming a better Jew, a more mindful and more conscious Jew that's more careful of how you use your time and how you serve your Creator wherever you are, then you've been hijacked by Amalek, where your head is effectively severed from your body. Pardon the gruesome analogy. It's like a guillotine, but your head has to be attached to your shoulders. When it is attached to your shoulders, when your head is feeding your emotions and hence your actions, it's then that you know that you have vanquished Amalek. Amalek is constantly standing at our door, trying to jump at any opportunity to be able to pull us away from serving our Creator. He is the ultimate nemesis of the Jewish people, not only in a physical sense, but in a spiritual sense as well. His job is to lure us away from serving our Creator. And it's through this mitzvah that we can remain vigilant, to remember that we have a natural built-in handicap. We have a natural problem where there is a disconnect between the head and the actions. It's Amalek. That's the name of this problem. And identifying the illness, we know, Hasidus teaches us, identifying the illness is halfway to the cure. By being able to give it a name, to use modern psychology terms, what you're doing is that you're actually externalizing the problem. Instead of identifying with the problem and saying, what can I do? I can't turn my convictions into actions. What you're doing is, modern psychology tells us to identify the problem, give it a name, describe it, maybe even in terms of a certain kind of animal. Winston Churchill, who struggled with depression, would often talk about his black dog. The black dog has shown up. The black dog is here today. And that's how he would externalize his depression, preventing it from hijacking his functional role as a world leader and his personal life. If we could do the same, if we could externalize our inability to connect between our head and our actions by calling it a name, it's Amalek. Have you met the Amalek within you? The hijacker who's trying to dislocate those things which need to be connected within you, that's trying to sever your head, God forbid, from your actions. Then what you've done is that you've been able to say, this is not who I am. That's not me. I've been hijacked. Okay. So we know who you are. At least you know who you are. You know that this is not yourself and that there's a problem. Yes, Amalek is similar to our Yetzer Hara, our evil inclination. Amalek is is the manifestation of our evil inclination, Madison, in a specific sense when it comes to this particular behavior. Madison, how can Hashem be kind and good when He instructs us to wipe out man, women, and children or entire nations? Okay, I hope I've answered that question by now. To realize that it's not on a physical sense that we're talking about over here, but today we're learning on a spiritual sense. You're supposed to wipe out any vestige of this kind of behavior. When nations of the world can gather at the United Nations or at the EU and say, we're committed to world peace, we're committed to making the world a better place, yet we refuse to recognize Hamas as a terrorist organization. Yet when it comes to any confrontations in Israel, it's always Israel that's at fault. Anybody who talks about a two-state solution, let's be clear here for a moment. I'm sorry to change the topic somewhat, but the moment that you talk about a two-state solution, what you're insinuating is that the problem is the Jewish people's problem. It's the Jewish people that are at the core of the lack of peace in the Middle East, because the Jews have a state, the Arabs don't have a state, and if the Jews would only be willing to give away some of their land, there'll be peace in the Middle East. This is the 800-pound gorilla that we're refusing to recognize when the nations of the world talk to us about a two-state solution, as if it's our fault, and we know that peace would happen in Israel if the Arabs would lay down their weapons. But if the Jews would lay down their weapons, we know that would be the end of Israel. So it's important to understand that when the world talks about, wanting the world peace, yet at the same time in the values of the United Nations, the nations will beat swords into plowshares, right? Which is emblazoned on the wall right outside of the United Nations. Yet at the same time, they talk about terrorists and Hamas being somehow what do they call them? They call them guerrilla warfare or something. Whatever, they give them a term that somehow legitimizes them. This doesn't make sense. It's a disconnect between the brain and the action. The Rebbe would talk about how in Italy, they're very, very good with beauty and design, but when it comes to functionality, they're not always the strongest. That's more the department of the Germans or maybe the Japanese. So when it comes to the Italian trains, the Rebbe would say, he observed when he was there, that sometimes, the train was a beautiful train, but they forgot to connect the carriages to the engine. So the engine would depart the station, but the carriages remained behind because there was a disconnect between between the two. And that's where Amalek comes in. Amalek is that disconnect between the carriage and everybody else. What's these comments coming in? Unfortunately, that is the teaching at our universities. Yes. Didn't get the Amy comments over there, but yeah, fantastic. All right, guys. So let's wrap it up over here. We've got a deeper insight today into who Amalek is, understanding the Amalek within ourselves. Let's externalize our natural problem by divine design. God gave us this problem. So don't feel badly about it. But once you know what it is, you're halfway to curing the illness. Let's conquer Amalek. Let's bring Mashiach. Thank you very much.